Welcome to the Rimworld DLC rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Anomaly. Hey folks, this is a small series of videos dedicated to breaking down individual Rimworld DLC. As Rimworld is a game that very rarely goes on sale and the amount of DLC is ever growing, not everyone is going to be in the position to buy everything in one go. As such, you'll likely want to make sure that any DLC you do pick up gives you the most content that you're really excited about and adds the most value to your game. Anomaly was the fourth DLC released for Rimworld and includes the study of dark and mysterious artifacts, entities and phenomenon. It includes over 30 new events, an entirely new research tree for Void study, some new resources, ghouls and the upgrades for them, 4 very powerful drugs, 3 weapons, 1 implant, 8 utility items, 3 pieces of clothing, 16 new structures, 1 floor, 1 door, an entity codex with 8 basic, 17 advanced and 2 ultimate entries, 14 rituals to unlock, 2 memes if you're using ideology, 1 new starting scenario, and 1 new ending with a choice to make. For a TLDR, Anomaly is the hardest DLC released at the time of recording. Many of the new events and enemies will challenge you outside of normal killbox shenanigans or sidecast abuse, thanks to how they spawn, interact or engage with your colony. From infiltrating to waging psychological warfare, a lot of players will install this DLC, instantly try and interact with the new monolith and be wiped out by the horrors that it unleashes before reaching the end of year 1. I'd liken this to killing the wall of flesh in Terraria. You'll likely want to engage with the content included in Anomaly once your colony is set up and running smoothly, as once you start, it's not really going to let up. Due to the nature of the content in Anomaly, this suffers in a similar way to Ideology, maybe even more so, in that if you want to play with a colony that doesn't interact with core mechanics around the DLC, an Ideology for Ideology or Void Study for Anomaly, you will get very little out of it in comparison to Royalty or Biotech. As for many new events that Anomaly has, they're almost all tied to the Void. All of the rituals and structures are also involved with Void research, so if you're ignoring the monolith in a colony, you might pick up a few new items from traders, but that's honestly going to be about it. Before we dive deep, it's well worth saying that for my coverage of Royalty, Ideology and Biotech, I had hundreds more hours to play, test, and mod those releases before I did any coverage. Anomaly is still very fresh. As such, it's naturally harder to be definitive in any statements around it. This video is going to be based a lot more on vibes and feelings than my other ones, and I hate using the word feel to describe something because saying something feels a certain way is useless as a descriptor. You'll also see that this video includes a much broader approach to the video content. I spent a solid 50 hours with a colony to get the footage in this video and I'm damn well going to use it. In that time, I can say that I hadn't tested everything, tried all possible eventualities, and we've yet to see what the mod scene around Anomaly is actually capable of. So if you're viewing this video a year or so after its launch and thinking, well duh, just install X and it'll fix it, bear in mind that this coverage was made with the intention of looking at Anomaly in isolation of sorts. If for whatever reason you were to only pick up Anomaly, what would you actually get, and where does it fit into the Rimworld ecosystem? Naturally, I'll cover its interaction with the other DLC, but the assumption that every player is going to own every DLC and then install hundreds of mods is a flawed starting point. So, how does Anomaly stand up? Let's cover the overall impact from this DLC first, which is that it's hard. Much harder than any of the official content released before it. Fortunately, you control when you activate the features of Anomaly happening inside your colony, meaning that you can still have a steady, standard experience without being absolutely donked on by nightmare creatures for as long as you'd like, and I'd recommend it. Anomaly will impact many aspects of your colony, so you won't just be dealing with dangerous monsters, you'll also have new psychological effects, dangers that will appear on your tile, long-lasting negative events, and the game will throw multiple risks at you that need to be contained or suppressed to stop them from creating huge problems, which will compound the longer you're investigating the horrors of the Void. So let's talk about the main mechanic of Anomaly, entities and Anomaly research. I'm not going to spoil the ending in this rundown, so we'll skip talking about ultimate entries in the codex, but this section is likely going to spoil all of the basic and advanced entries for you. it's kinda hard not to when doing coverage about this DLC. The first entry is for the Void Monolith, which is your conduit to interact with pretty much all of the new content. You'll need to awaken the monolith to allow the void to start creeping its way into your world. Once the monolith has been awakened, then you'll be able to start studying it, which earns you the new research currency for Anomaly projects. Anomaly research has its own tree, divided into basic and advanced. Studying basic sources progresses basic projects, and unsurprisingly, studying advanced sources will progress the advanced ones. To unlock research further down the tree, you will need to encounter new entities or phenomena. Capturing these entities and studying them gives you the opportunity to progress more rapidly through the projects, so the whole system works in this self-feeding loop. See it, study it, utilise it. I'll cover the entities first, then the research tree and what entities unlock it. At the basic level, you've got Harbinger trees, Flesh Beasts, Sight Stealers, Shamblers, Ghouls, Gorehulks and Deathpaw. As I go into exploring all of these entities, just know that all of the events I mention that this DLC contains normally relates to them in some way. Arrivals, quests, weather effects, raids, pretty much all of the dangers of the DLC will utilise one of these. Harbinger trees are a really useful corpse disposal method. With a lot of events and enemy types included in Anomaly, you can expect lots of gross, useless corpses to be left on your tile. This fixes that problem for you by consuming any nearby bodies to speed up its growth. If Harbinger trees are well fed, they'll likely sprout more nearby and spread their corpse munching range. Handy, one of the few entities that you don't really need to worry about. Flesh Beasts come in 4 flavours: Finger Spikes, Tri-Spikes, Tough Spikes and Bulb Freaks. Usually they appear by bursting free from an underground cavern, giving you time to move away from their spawning location. Finger Spikes are a speedy melee glass cannon that value quantity over quality, aiming to overwhelm your colonists and finger them to death.
Hold up, wait a minute.
Tri-Spikes are 3 Finger Spikes smushed into one entity, which will split into 3 upon being killed, meaning you're going to keep creating more enemies to deal with. If you found 1 finger a little easy to take, 3 will be a bit harder.
Oh my.
Tough Spikes are able to attack from range and have a hardened carapace, whilst they are also dangerous in melee, so you can expect them to charge in under a cover of smaller flesh beasts, throwing out damage where possible or clawing at you if you try and engage them in melee. Finally, you've got Bulb Freaks, which are bigger, chunkier Tri-Spikes. Instead of just exploding into small finger spikes, they erupt into a variety of flesh beasts, which may in turn explode into even more flesh beasts. It just never ends. A strong line with an incendiary weapon is highly effective against these enemies, as finger spikes will rapidly die to fire, and having them split onto immolated surfaces will see them taking damage before they get a chance to turn and run towards you. Weapons that have a high aiming time are going to struggle against flesh beasts, rarely getting even a couple of shots off before the pawn is overrun and locked into melee with them. Sight Stealers are your first step towards what terrors this DLC can actually throw your way. Invisible creatures that can just stalk around the map. You won't even know they exist until someone wanders too close to them, which will make them appear and then charge to attack you. Whilst they don't necessarily do a massive amount of damage, they're very capable of catching colonists in a bad situation, picking off weaker or already injured members, even going as far as to stalking inside of your base, so you aren't safe anywhere. Whilst they do have a form of counter, we'll discuss that later with research. Shamblers are your zombies, the Walking Dead, the living impaired. It covers everything from Skellybobs to Goopy Boys to undead animals. They can appear from a few different events, such as a small group wandering in, a huge horde crossing your map, or a full-out assault. Shamblers tend to ignore normal pathing, preferring to split in unpredictable ways and even breaking down walls, doors, or whatever else stands in their way. Whilst they aren't exactly fast, they don't give a crap about pain and they are psychically immune, meaning you need to mow them down, as hordes of them edge their way towards you, even going as far as to continually crawling in an attempt to bite your ankles.
Come back here and take what's coming to you! I'll bite your legs off!
You need to put them down with overwhelming damage and a use of tactical retreats, or hope that there's another threat on the map to fight them for you. Ghouls are 28 days later zombies, bodies implanted with architect shards and twisted by void energy. They have a range of enhancements that they can come in with, barbs, plates and hearts. Being savage melee combatants, they feel no pain, have rapid regeneration and an immunity to psychic effects. As well as ghouls being potential enemies, you'll also have the ability to create your own. The only need that they have is food, requiring raw meat. They're incapable of all work, making them purebred meat shields. With the right traits, prisoners who may have previously lacked much potential have the option to become an absolute unit for your front line. Gore Hulks are massive, lumbering, twisted humanoids with protruding spines. They're capable of attacking at range, firing the quills towards your colonists, but because of their size, they lack finesse in melee. So whilst you want to deal with most of the enemies in Anomaly at range, the huge and intimidating looking Gore Hulks are actually something that you want to get right up underneath. Like pretty much any Dark Souls boss, the safest place is inside it. And finally there is Deathpaw, which unlike the other entries for Basic, isn't a creature, this is weather. Deathpaw that lands on corpses will reanimate them into shamblers, be they animals or humanoids. It can quickly cause spirals if it happens when there is a trader on your tile, or if it happens after a raid. Shamblers rise, swarm any remaining survivors, and in turn make more shamblers. It's why you want to make liberal use of the Harbinger tree. Corpses that hang around on your tile are a threat waiting to happen. Fortunately, every time the body is resurrected by Deathpaw, its condition is lowered, to the point that eventually there simply isn't enough left to bring back. So if you happen to have a horde night during this weather, you can make it through it. It'll just be a long, long fight. Alright, that's all the basic entities. A little bit of spice, nothing too crazy. Let's cover some advanced horror. In this tier you have the Pit Gate, Dreadmeld, Fleshmass Heart, Fleshmass Nucleus, Chimera, Devourer, Noctilith, Noctol, Revenant, Metal Horror, Nochiosphere, Blood Rain, Twisted Obelisk, Corrupted Obelisk, Warped Obelisk, Golden Cube, and Unnatural Corpse. Whereas most of the entries in Basic were creatures, a lot more of the threats in Advanced are structures. The Pit Gate is a large crater that flesh beasts can emerge from, big enough to allow your colonists to descend down and seek out the source of its appearance. Left alone, a Pit Gate will occasionally spawn waves of flesh beasts to attack you, so depending on your setup, you may wish to deal with this immediately, or it may actually pose more of a benefit to you, occasionally delivering fresh study subjects directly to your doorstep. Inside the caverns of a Pit Gate are tight, winding corridors filled with fleshy growths and masses. Flesh beasts lurk and hunt any intruders in their lair. To be able to close a Pit Gate for good, you'll need to fight your way through and locate an entity known as the Dreadmeld, as it's this beast that is supporting the cavern via a psychic connection to the flesh walls within the burrow. The Dreadmeld is an alpha version of the Bulb Freak, multiple tentacles and claws, writhing and straining under the weight of the flesh beasts that are merged together to create it. Once it's taken enough damage, it erupts into a shower of all manner of flesh beasts and causes the caverns to begin to collapse. This gives your colonists just enough time to collect any loot found in the pit and fight their way back out to the surface. As with all fleshy enemies introduced in this DLC, fire is very effective. Flamethrowers, molotovs, and the underbarrel attachment on the Hellcat rifle are very useful to clear infestations of this nature. Next you've got the Fleshmass Heart. Whereas the Dreadmeld needed to hide underground, the Fleshmass Heart will erupt on your tile and begin to spread walls of flesh across it, like choking vines of gore. Until the heart itself is dealt with, they will continue to grow and spread, blocking your pathing, cutting off access to resources, and potentially trapping any visitors in the tile. The heart itself is far from vulnerable though, spawning flesh beasts to defend itself and creating large, acid-spitting maws within its fleshy growths. These acid artillery batteries will fire salvos at any of your colonists that wander too close or attempt to fight their way through the cancerous growth. What you're looking for are nerve clusters that grow within the mass, as these hold the information needed to defeat the heart. Once enough nerve clusters have been destroyed, you'll be able to administer a shock to the heart, knocking it into arrhythmia and causing it to perish. Once the heart dies, all of the growths begin to deteriorate and collapse, leaving behind whatever defenders were hiding within the fleshy walls and your prize, the Fleshmass Nucleus. If kept contained, this nucleus will spit out twisted meat on a regular basis and act as a reliable source of study. Unfortunately, you'll need to make sure that it's kept suppressed, as it's always trying to reform, to burst open once again into a flesh mass heart. This can be done by wardens, who will make sure to keep its activity to a desired level, making sure that it never spills over and becomes unmanageable.
Oh, shit.
The Chimera is a monstrous amalgamation of animals, savage in its speed, durability and damage potential. Whilst Chimera are aggressive animals, they aren't mindless, seeking out hunting opportunities if members of your colony are isolated or if the path back to the base can be intercepted. You'll want to make sure that you have the means to slow, stagger or stun a pack of Chimera, as they make mega spiders look like chump change. They're more than capable of removing limbs or even a head in a single powerful snap of their jaws. The Devourer moves away from the raw damage of a Chimera for the devastating potential of swallowing a colonist whole. Tanky, staunch, and capable of a dramatic lunge. What? Fuck it out! Oh! Ah! Oh shit, what the fuck? You'll want as much distance between this and your pawns as possible. Whilst swallowing a pawn won't instantly kill them, it'll put you on a timer to rescue them from inside their belly, as stomach acids are working to turn them into paste. With each one that manages to chomp a colonist taking away from your offensive power, this potentially leaves you with the situation of having to choose who to save, as you might not have enough damage to get through all of them in time. A Noctilith emergence will see your colony plunged into an unnatural darkness that is dangerous to traverse. Lights become your only hope. Flares and solar pinholes quickly shoot up in utility when any dark tiles around your base pose a risk to the colonist of being attacked by shadowy beings. Noctiliths will usually spawn as a scattered group, requiring you to send an expedition party out into the darkness to disable them, preferably lighting the way as you go. You can't ignore a Noctilith threat. The darkness will not pass until you've dealt with them, meaning any visitors to your tile will just be killed in shadow. Plants will no longer grow and your colonists will likely be restricted to staying within your walls. The Noctiliths are guarded by Noctols, which are insanely fast and dangerous melee attackers. They are, however, vulnerable to light, with exposure to it causing them pain and slowing them down dramatically. So you want to light up not only the area that you're travelling through, but the surrounding space too. This ensures that Noctols can't simply jump out of the darkness and strike your group. The Revenant is a terrifying foe. Like a sight stealer, it can creep around undetected, with its goal being slightly different. It doesn't try to outright kill a colonist, but instead it puts them under hypnosis.
Thank you so much for coming up. Look at me now and just sleep. Just sink right the way down, right the way deep.
Shrugging off damage and stalking its prey ever faster, once the Revenant has caught its target, it drops them into a coma and scurries away to hide once more, hibernating for 24 hours and recovering some of its health. Each time the Revenant catches one of your colonists, it leaves behind a fragment to study, which will make it progressively easier to track down. To break its invisibility, you'll need to hit it with EMP, fire foam, flares, fire, or an explosive. If you don't have any of these options, you'll need to wait until it's enraptured 3 of your colonists, as the final step of fragment study will allow your pawns to see it without the previously mentioned methods. From there, you'll need to keep chasing it down as it repeatedly tries to hide from you, moving progressively faster the longer it's left uncovered. Once the Revenant has been dealt with, it will lose its form and collapse into nothing more than a spine, giving you the option of using it, studying it, or destroying it for good. It also releases all of your colonists from its hypnosis and allows them to return to work. The Metal Horror is something that can have a physical form, but will most likely go undetected for days, months, maybe even years. Metal Horrors hide within a host's body, near undetectable. They seek to infect others around them, silently growing their influence within your group. Once one is threatened, it will take the form of a jagged metal monster and burst out of the host's body, potentially awakening any other metal horrors that it managed to infect throughout the colony. As you might expect, a metal entity ripping its way out of a pawn deals significant damage, leaving them badly injured and having to fight this entity that is now right next to them. Undeniably one of the most paranoia-inducing threats included with the DLC. The only clue that you might get that not is all as it seems is when fragments start being left behind from infected colonists, as they can then be studied, allowing you to focus in with a surgical inspection to look for its biosignature.
And Clark was human, huh?
Just remember that a doctor that's been infected with a metal horror will be unlikely to tell the truth about test results, as they're then in a much better position to tend to the colony while secretly infecting everybody, leading to overwhelming odds when they no longer lay dormant and spring into action. The Nokia sphere is initially dormant, exuding a painful aura that simply hurts to be anywhere near. If captured and studied, the sphere can be activated and turned against your enemies, allowing it to enter something known as Onslaught mode. This sees it teleport around firing an energy blaster, pulsing huge AoE waves of pain, and firing a cannon that turns anything in its splash radius into a mist. This would all be great, if it didn't also run the risk of deciding to teleport towards your colonists instead, seeing it chase you around your own base, terrified of its destructive power. Once Onslaught mode expires, it will again become dormant and can be recaptured and recontained. Eventually it will begin to wane, and you're given around 10 days to decide on its final use, after which it simply disappears. Blood rain is another weather effect that's probably going to be a nightmare for uploading on YouTube because of the gore rules. Whereas Deathpool reanimates corpses into shamblers, Blood Rain progressively turns animals and humans caught inside it more aggressive and boosts their melee damage, with an increasing risk of having a Berserker Rage mental break. Depending on its duration and your base layout, this can do practically nothing, or it can doom spiral your entire colony. The Twisted Obelisk is one of the 3 obelisks that can randomly appear on your tile. Living up to its name, the Twisted Obelisk causes mutations and creates grotesque abnormalities on those who interact with it, or the surrounding flora and fauna. Pawns can develop tentacle growths that function as an arm or even whips. Their lungs can distort, granting them immunity to lung rot and asthma, as well as a bit of toxic resistance. Their stomachs may mutate, causing discomfort but removing any risk of food poisoning. Nearby trees may be transformed into harbinger trees, and the local wildlife may erupt into flesh beasts. If kept suppressed and studied, your pawns can intentionally trigger mutations from the obelisk. However, if this is left alone for too long, it'll explode violently into a wave of energy, randomly and uncontrollably mutating whatever is within its range. The Corrupted Obelisk is the next one, making seemingly perfect copies of pawns who try to study it, eventually unlocking the ability to forcefully copy a chosen pawn on a long cooldown. Like the Twisted Obelisk, this needs to be kept suppressed, otherwise it'll violently explode with energy, releasing multiple hostile clones of your colonists onto the map and then potentially overwhelming you. Notice that I said seemingly perfect copies before.
Brian, I think my jaw is falling off. Oh!
As not all is as it initially appears. Duplicates can have one of 4 issues which manifest sometime after they've been created. They may of course immediately be hostile, which might result in you potentially having to kill them whilst trying to bring them down for capture or recruitment purposes. They may eventually turn up with organ decay, so you'll need to find them spares of whatever parts are failing. They could suffer from crumbling mind, which will progressively lower their consciousness, eventually becoming a permanent debuff. The only cure to this is to hit them with a heal and mech serum before the malady reaches its peak effect. And finally, they may cause lowered consciousness in both themselves and their original, which will progressively worsen until both pawns die, meaning you need to choose if you want to keep the original or the copy, as this can only be fixed by one of them dying. The last obelisk is the warped version, which is by far the most unique. As with the other 2, it requires suppressing to keep it from activating upon reaching 100%. However, interacting with this obelisk may trigger this negative event somewhat unpredictably, so this is by far the most unstable of the 3. The warped obelisk may randomly teleport the pawn that was studying it or suppressing it into a space called the Labyrinth. A backrooms-esque location that will see rooms linked in all kinds of directions, some containing loot, food, or supplies that will help you continue exploring, and others may be hosting dangers. The transported pawn will need to explore this space to find clues about the direction of the exit if they want to survive. Some markings on the floor may give indications of north, south, east, or west. Some doors may open freely, whereas others need to be forced. If the pawn can successfully navigate this area and make it to the obelisk inside the labyrinth, they will see themselves return to the colony and the obelisk will disappear from the map, potentially spilling out any dangers that were still lurking around inside. The next one. Oh, this one. The Golden Cube. Pawns will be drawn to the cube, obsessed with the cube. Their mind will think of nothing but the cube. They'll make sculptures of it, lose sleep, work slower. All they want is the cube and they can't let it go. If you destroy their sculptures, they'll be furious. If they're taken away from the cube for too long, their consciousness simply slips away. If your colonists take it in turns to study the cube, they will all become absorbed by its glory, its shining golden light of hope. For all life belongs to the cube. We are all cubes. The cube is cube. And you'll need to destroy this fucking thing. Once you finally get the option to smash it into bits, you'll be warned that any pawns that are drawn to the cube will enter a berserk rage. The solution is simple. Just put them under sedation. It removes that risk pretty quickly. And finally, you've got the unnatural corpse. This is probably one of the most unsettling things in the DLC. You'll be told of the corpse's exact likeness of one of your colonists and its wax-like texture. It doesn't rot, it moves by itself, and no matter what you do to it, it'll return. I found this thing outside of the base randomly, seemingly moved of its own free will. It's turned up in bedrooms, corridors, it's been buried and made its way back out. It'll drive the colonists that it looks like mad, triggering them to have corpse obsessions to display the body, which only makes it more bizarre when you see that they've thrown it outside. When you scroll back to your base, it has already returned.
Bonnie, how do you keep getting back in?
Eventually, this corpse will wake up, and that is when you need a miracle to bring it down. It ignores all other pawns beside the one that it looks like. It is single-minded, relentless, unforgiving in its chase. If you block it, it teleports. If you wall around its target, it breaks them down. It has a singular goal, and that is to murder its master. Once it reaches what it desires, it channels a psychic scream. If it manages to complete that, the pawn has its brain liquefied. The corpse's job is complete. It finally rests. When one of these things lands, you'll want all manner of hurdles for it to cross, turrets to focus fire, and your other colonists cannot stop pulling the trigger until the job is done. This thing is murderous intent personified. So that's all the entities that I'm happy to talk about. The final two are linked with the new ending that Anomaly introduces. Spoiling the endings included with the DLCs by showing them or talking too deeply about them always feels like a bit of a dick move. Just know that this ending stands alone in that it doesn't actually end the game. Credits will roll, but you'll still be able to play the colony afterwards, so maybe don't go too scorched earth during the final quest and destroy your own base in the process. There are a couple of other events that aren't covered by these entities too. There are the cultist chanters and the psychic ritual siege. Anomaly will add in a new hostile faction that occasionally attacks you using these event types. They'll make use of the same rituals that you can unlock via study to attack your colony, from trying to teleport a colonist out so that they can abduct them, to summoning flesh beasts or shamblers to attack you. They act like a very fast-paced siege, as they need far less time to set up. They simply come in, start a ritual circle, and force you to come out and face them. You might also get some new events on the world map, distress calls from other factions, so if you travel to these sites you'll likely find a host of Anomaly creatures to fight and a few unique bits of loot to take home. So what are these rituals? Nearly all of them will be unlocked by discovering these Anomaly events and researching the associated tech, giving you 14 rituals in total. Some rituals have targeted effects, others are more general in what they try and manifest to happen on your tile. For general rituals, you have Void Provocation, Skip Abduction, Pleasure Pulse, Neurosis Pulse, Draw Animals, Draw Flesh Beasts, Draw Shamblers, Blood Rain, and Provoke Pit Gate. You can use Psychophagy, Philophagy, Chronophagy, Brain Wipe, and Imbue Death Refusal on a target of your choice. Just like when performing rituals from Ideology, these all have offsets related to things like the amount of participants, psychic sensitivity of the chanter, clothing participants may be wearing, any presets you've taken for your colony, and any additional structures around the ritual circle that are boosting its power. The higher the percentage, the less likely you are to have the negative effect happen, or the more potent and long-lasting the positive effect will be. So really quickly, what are these rituals then? Void Provocation is likely to be the first thing you'll have access to. It involves metaphorically poking the void with a stick to make it do something. It could be any number of potential events. Shamblers, Gorehulks, Deathpaw, Obelisks, etc. Much like taking on a quest that involves combat, this can seemingly reset your raid timers, so you're not totally overwhelmed by threats all at once. From the time spent using this ritual, it seems to me that this overrides the negative event trigger and puts it on a cooldown of sorts, which for a storyteller like Randy doesn't always matter a whole lot. Psychophagy involves stripping a target's mind to boost the chanters with additional psychic sensitivity, with the duration of the buff being improved by the ritual quality. The sacrificial target becomes psychically deaf and suffers a horrific brain scar. This ritual will allow you to stepladder your ritual quality essentially. Any surviving raiders that you find and deem useless, or any kidnapped guests, can be used to fuel this ritual. Then as the chanter's psychic sensitivity is buffed, it makes the next psychophagy stronger. With just a few cycles of this ritual, you can see the buff going from lasting 30 days or so to almost 2 years. This easily allows you to have 50% psychic sensitivity bonuses across your entire colony, and it goes even further in boosting all other rituals thanks to the chanter's high psychic sensitivity impact. Next we have Skip Abduction. As you can probably guess, this pairs perfectly with Psychophagy if you happen to abduct a pawn that is less than stellar. Randomly acquiring a hostile pawn from the world, with the ritual quality offsetting how long the target's put into a coma, this is basically a free potential colonist every 10 days, or free ritual fuel if you're going down that route instead. As it's pulling from the world pawn pool, you have a higher than average chance of getting a faction leader when using this ritual. Up next is Draw Animals, which is somewhat lackluster. You'll need to be really on the ball to use this ritual, as the animals will enter and try to immediately exit the tile, sometimes picking an exit that is so close to their spawn location that you physically cannot reach them in time. If this ritual goes poorly, instead of an animal migration you can expect a manhunter pack, so this potentially gives you either no meat or goopy corpses. Your call. Chronophagy is a strong, targeted ritual that saps the life force from the target and feeds it into the chanter, with the higher ritual outcome percentage impacting how many years are reversed from this process. It's also possible to use this ritual to fix scarring on the chanter, but it cannot be used to restore limbs or digits. This is very useful given that a lot of the enemies in Anomaly have a tendency to go for the eyes and create nasty permanent injuries. Draw Flesh Beasts is just what it sounds like, with ritual quality impacting how many flesh beasts are summoned. This can be useful as an emergency defense if enemy raiders are waiting to attack, or a potential source of bodies to study or butcher for your own colony. Just make sure that you're ready to fight before hitting the button, as they may not always appear where you'd expect, or act as you might hope. Draw Shamblers is the next ritual, and works along the same principle. Some threats may be easier to dispatch with the sheer volume of bodies that Shamblers is likely to draw, such as a tribal faction, whereas any faction that has explosives or incendiary weapons are going to cleave through a pack of Shamblers relatively easily, providing that the AI doesn't do the whole let's run into melee to use a rocket launcher thing. Philophagy is targeted and steals the experience from the pawn's highest skill, with more XP stolen based on the ritual quality. Just like Psychophagy, this causes brain damage, so the sacrifice isn't going to be much use afterwards. Very handy in cases where you get a strong prisoner that got unlucky with their trait roll, like a wimp with melee 17. Now that Melee 17 can potentially go to another pawn that has solid traits, but is still in the process of learning skills, giving them a huge leg up. Pleasure Pulse is similar to a colony-wide joy wire, improving everybody's mood at the cost of reducing their work speed for a set amount of time. The time can be increased by raising the ritual quality, which means for something like this, perhaps you don't want it around for too long, just long enough to get everybody through a psychic drone or over a colonist death. Blood Rain will summon the weather effect on your tile, possibly useful if you've got raiders that are trying to siege you or are waiting to send an assault at you. It can also be useful for awoken mechanoid clusters, as man-hunting animals will throw themselves against any defences they may have set up, potentially destroying a turret or two and taking down some of the roaming defenders. Death Refusal is insanely powerful. The target can be granted charges of the ability Resurrect, which can be triggered from their corpse if they're killed, providing a corpse remains to trigger the ability of course. Imbuing a pawn with the use of Death Refusal is a somewhat expensive process, requiring a shard, a resource that occasionally drops from entities, and lowering the target's skills by a percentage, offset by the ritual quality, so you're going to want your best chanters for this one. When returned to life, the pawn is understandably in a bit of a negative mood, and has some resurrection sickness. You'll also find they have a very healthy dose of any scars remaining from the injuries that got them killed in the first place. Not really a bad downside for having revives on demand though, especially given the rarity of a resurrection serum in the game. Brain Wipe is going to be a holy grail for some players, a ritual that's capable of removing Unwaveringly Loyal from targeted pawns. It removes negative memories, makes the targets easier to convert and recruit as well. Unfortunately, it does put them into a coma for a while, with the quality offsetting just how long this lasts. If you're always finding that survivors from raids inevitably survived because they have the Unwaveringly Loyal tag, despair no more, now they're yours. Neurosis Pulse is the flip side of Pleasure Pulse, reducing mood to boost productivity. If your colony is thriving and in high spirits, this can really improve progress, also making it easier to keep moods high as you'll be able to create higher level foods and drugs quickly to offset this mood debuff, all whilst everyone flies through research, study, construction and crafting. Timed correctly with a big harvest of Devil Strand, this can easily see your whole colony kitted out in new threads overnight. And finally, you've got Provoke Pitgate, obviously one of the biggest threats you can summon for yourself via these rituals, far less reliable against enemies than simply summoning Shamblers or Flesh Beasts. This does allow you to go spelunking for all the goodies that are inside the Pitgate itself though, as you'll very often find lots of shards and psychic items within fleshy pots. Just remember that if you're going to go the route of immolation in a Pitgate, they do count as indoors, and the majority of loot that they can drop can and will burn to ashes, so maybe don't go down and set everything ablaze immediately, as it'll hit that magic 200 degrees of spontaneous combustion and destroy everything inside, unless you just felt like burning things. Okay, so that's rituals and entities covered. Now that we know what these things are and how they can appear, I guess we should cover the associated research with Anomaly. From what I can see, there's only one new bit of tech in the main research tree that Anomaly introduced, the security door.
Wrong.
That is absolutely
wrong.
Proved over and over again.
Wrong.
Available after auto door research, this is a heavily reinforced 2x1 door that opens slower than a standard auto door, but has far greater durability. Very useful for defensive setups, or if you needed to contain something perhaps. There are 20 basic Anomaly research projects and 19 advanced ones. Of these projects, 19 are locked behind needing to discover entries in the codex before you can get the associated research. Let's cover those that you'll have unlocked without entries first then. At basic, you have Void Provocation, which grants you the ritual spot and the ritual of the same name. Your introduction into that system, as it were. This leads you into Psychophagy, Chronophagy, Skip Abduction and Draw Animals, which we all know about from the previously mentioned rituals. Void Sculptures is a research that unlocks that structure at the art bench. They can be placed around your ritual site to increase its quality, supporting up to 6. Quality of the created sculptures also impacts how much of a benefit they provide to the ritual quality. Down from that, we have bioferrite harvesting. I haven't really covered bioferrite yet. It's a resource that's extracted from void entities, with larger, more dangerous ones providing higher amounts. The bioferrite harvester can be attached to a holding platform for a captured entity, allowing it to slowly extract the resource for your own needs. I know we haven't covered capturing entities yet, we'll do that in just a moment. Harvesting leads into bioferrite shaping, which opens up new items to make with the material. The shaping bench itself, a ceremonial hood, ritual mask, and the nerve spiker weapon, as well as bioferrite floor plates. Bioferrite does function like a stuffable material, meaning that you can use it to build walls too, so if you want to make an entire room out of bioferrite, it's possible. Bioferrite shaping leads into bioferrite weaponry, which unlocks the other two weapons included in the DLC, the Hellcat rifle and the incinerator. There will be a little section on the new gear at the end of the rundown, as it's easy to cover it all in one go. Looking back from harvesting, you'll also have the sleep suppressor research. This device progressively lowers sleep fall rate in an AoE around itself, with the downside being that it pisses off whoever's close enough to feel its effect. Upon reaching extreme exposure, it completely removes the loss of sleep in affected colonists. Potentially useful for places like labs or crafting rooms, if you've got the mood to spare. Just make sure that you're setting colonists less sleep hours in their schedule if you're planning on making actual use of this. The Frenzy Inducer works much the same, only for move speed and global work speed, with the downside being that any mental breaks that will happen will be violent whilst under its effect. As you might imagine, paired with a sleep suppressor, this can make certain rooms absolutely insane for productivity. You just need to get used to berserk rages, social fights, and the occasional murderous tendency. At the bottom of the tech tree, we have entity containment, so let's talk about that. This research unlocks the electric inhibitor, the shard inhibitor, and the holding platform. By default, you'll only have access to the holding spot without any research. Think of the holding spot and platform like a sleep spot and an actual bed for prisoners, with the built structure providing better benefits. Entities cannot be captured like a normal pawn. They're required to be held in containment rather than a simple prison. To function, a containment needs 4 walls, a closed door, and a holding spot. This will only hold basic entities which have a very low containment value though. For large creatures, you'll want to make sure the room is lit, use a proper containment platform, build stronger walls as they provide a bigger bonus, use a steel, or if you can, security door, some bioferrite flooring, and any combination of the structures that boost containment, like the electric inhibitor or shard inhibitor. Up to 6 electric inhibitors can be connected into a single containment platform, providing a bonus of 60 containment strength at max. Only 1 shard inhibitor can be connected per building, but a shard inhibitor can connect to multiple platforms, even through walls, providing an additional 20 containment strength. The previously mentioned bioferrite harvester works like the shard inhibitor too, only allowing 1 per platform but being able to connect to many. The harvester, however, will actually lower containment strength, as it angers the entity and makes it more desperate to break out. Containment strength functions similarly to prisoner escape chance. The higher you go over the required amount, the longer the time in between escape attempts, and entities will try to break out eventually, no matter how strong your containment. The next research is the Electro Harvester. Like the Bioferrite Harvester, it can connect to multiple platforms but will anger the entities that it's harvesting from.
In order to change a human being into this.
Providing more bioelectric energy for your base depending on the size of the entity. I wouldn't recommend this as a reliable power source, however, as one big containment breach and you're not only losing power, but also your power source if you kill the entity as it tries to escape. The last bit of research unlocked by default at basic is Disruptor Flares, a utility item that comes in massively handy for finding invisible entities, and can be used to stun large groups of enemies, further impacting their stats once the stun wears off. It's like an EMP for biological entities. Then you've got the advanced research that's available from the start, which includes advanced psychic rituals, that doesn't actually unlock a ritual, but rather the shard beacon. 4 of these can be placed around a ritual spot to further increase the ritual percentage. Thankfully, these are a flat quality and offset, so you won't need to keep trying to make them to the best quality like you would with sculptures. Advanced rituals will then allow you to research philophagy, which we know about. In the middle row, now you've got serum synthesis, which unlocks the serum lab structure and your first craftable for it, Void Light Serum. There are 4 serums in the game and they are all extremely potent. The Void Light lasts for 15 days and improves study speed by 125%, psychic sensitivity by 125%, and lowers mood by 4. Extremely useful if you have a base absolutely full of entities that need studying, as the work can rapidly consume your colonists' hours, leaving other jobs to fall dramatically far behind. From this research, you can then also unlock the Mind Numb Serum, which completely removes both positive and negative moods at the cost of 5% consciousness, and it lasts 2 days. So whilst pawns are no longer able to gain an inspiration, it's also 2 days of complete freedom from any mental break. Requiring Neutro and Bioferrite, this isn't one of the easiest things to keep an entire colony using, but it can make for a very powerful combo when combined with sleep suppression and frenzy inducers, meaning that you can have someone willing to work for 48 hours straight, barring their meal and recreation time, with a massively enhanced productivity percentage and no risk of mental break. The bottom row then has the Bioferrite generator. This produces 4,000 watts at the cost of needing 60 Bioferrite every 10 days to keep it fueled. It also comes with the downside that burning Bioferrite isn't exactly a pleasant process, so anybody in the immediate vicinity of this generator suffers a mood penalty. Fortunately, the mood debuff doesn't seem to stack, so walking into a room with 20 of these won't cause your pawn to have an instant breakdown. You'll just want to make sure that they're in a cluster away from foot traffic if you do plan on using them. Finally, there is the atmospheric heater, which consumes not only power but also needs fueling with Bioferrite too, at a rate of 80 for 10 days. This is your very own climate adjuster, with the caveat being it can only heat things up.
How dare you!
You won't be able to use this to mitigate a heat wave. You can definitely use it to ignore cold snaps and turn your tile into a permanent summer though. So what about other research? What are we actually unlocking? Discovering a flesh beast unlocks the ability to research draw flesh beasts, which makes sense. Sight stealers grant you the proximity detection research, which gives you a structure that warns when invisible creatures are within its range. Very useful to set up through entry choke points so you're warned when something is approaching. Also useful to keep coverage over your own corridors if something like a revenant manages to escape. Shamblers unlock the research to draw shamblers. Ghouls unlock infusion, enhancements and resurrection research. So not only can you make your own ghouls, but you can also build upgrades for them, and you even have a cheap way of bringing them back to life if they're totally destroyed in combat, making what was already a solid frontline option even easier to maintain and keep reusing. Unlike the resurrection ritual that you can place on your colonists to avoid death, ghouls are going to need a few hours for the serum to take effect and bring them back to life, so you can't pop them straight back up in the middle of a fight. The enhancements are relatively straightforward. Barbs give the ghoul a strong melee damage effect at the cost of move speed. Plates give a damage reduction akin to tough at the cost of more move speed. You have 3 heart choices. Adrenal makes the ghouls consume more food, but gives them the ability to move and attack faster on a cooldown. Corrosive gives the ghoul an acid spit ability, causing huge amounts of pain to any targets unlucky enough to be splattered with its bile. The Metal Blood option impacts move speed, but gives the ghoul a cooldown ability that drastically lowers incoming damage, stacking with the armor plates if you've already got those installed too. These are all very powerful options. You can tank, spank, or blah blah blah. Gorehulks will unlock the Bliss Lobotomy research, which gives you the procedure of the same name. It will render the pawn unable to do any skilled labour or research, halve their learning speed for any remaining skills, but give them a massive mood boost. If you're using slaves or have dedicated haulers in your colony, this might actually be an option for some of them.
They let you keep the piece of brain they cut out.
Deathpaw unlocks Deadlife Dust research, which gets you the Deadlife packs and shells. Both of these replicate the Deathpaw effect, raising corpses, with the benefit being that they will only attack your enemies as the effect has been honed. This can be really useful if tied in with a mortar salvo, taking down a few enemies with explosives only to scatter a cloud of Deathpaw over their bodies, instantly bringing them back inside the raiders group to fight them. The Dreadmeld unsurprisingly unlocks the research of Provoke Pitgate, which unlocks the ritual of the same name. The Fleshmass Nucleus unlocks mutation weaponry, which allows you to create a biomutation lance and a biomutation pulsar. The lance is a targeted effect, whereas the pulsar will turn all of the animals in the area into flesh beasts, which are determined based on their body size. So a megasloth will become a bulb freak, and a rat will become a finger spike. Useful in some biomes if you really want to mess with a raid before they get to strike. The Chimera will unlock the Juggernaut serum. This hits the pawn's mood quite hard with a -10. On the upside they gain 0.5 move speed, 150% melee damage and 200% natural injury healing, on top of any benefits they may already have if you're playing with biotech. A Hussar with this and Go Juice, it's a one-man raid.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
The Revenant will unlock the Brain Wipe Ritual research and the ability to craft its spine into a body modification through Revenant Invisibility research. This gives you another option with Revenant spines besides capturing or smashing them. Instead, you're now able to grant a colonist the ability to go completely invisible by installing the modified spine into their body. This invisibility quite literally lets you get away with murder. Metal Horrors unlock the Metal Blood Serum, which will grant the user a damage reduction effect equal to the Tough trait, at the cost of making them highly vulnerable to fire and burns, skyrocketing those damage types up to 400%. Useful if you know what you're going up against, potentially catastrophic if a rogue imp somehow sneaks a flame breath onto a colonist who is using this. The Nokia unlocks Insanity weaponry, which allows you to build your own scuffed versions of the Psychic Shock and Insanity lances that suffer from reduced range. It does, however, give you a pretty solid version of an animal pulsar, which behaves just like a normal Architect one. Blood Rain unlocks the 2 rituals of Neurosis Pulse and, as you'd guess, Blood Rain. The Golden Cube unlocks Pleasure Pulse research, and finally, the Unnatural Corpse grants you the Death Refusal tech, which ideally you want on the colonist that it picks to be its victim before it's too late. And that is your research. So what's left? Gear? I mentioned that you get 3 weapons in this DLC. The Nerve Spiker, the Hellcat Rifle and the Incinerator. The Nerve Spiker crossbow relies more on its stun effect than its potential damage. Being able to stop an organic target in its tracks with a well-placed shot, this obviously plays much better against large, hulking targets rather than small, swarming ones due to the somewhat large wind-up and cooldown time. You'll also want the accuracy boost from aiming at something that is bigger than a normal body size to really make it count. The Hellcat Rifle is a weaker assault rifle that comes with the added functionality of a short-range flamethrower ability. Very useful against metal horrors, fleshy growths, or large groups of shamblers. It's a nice weapon to keep on a scouting force for the flexibility that it can offer. The Incinerator throws flexibility out of the window and solves the problem by simply using more fire. With a minimum range requirement, you'll want to keep the users of it behind your front line, which may seem crazy, but they're more than capable of spewing lines of fire over the heads of friendlies. Its normal firing mode can be used indefinitely without needing to recharge or refuel. However, the Flame Burst, similar to the Hellcat rifle, has limited charges before it'll need to be topped back up with Bioferrite. It's a situational weapon, but very, very effective given its range and the spread nature of its attack. You've got a few new bits of armour too, or clothing I guess. The Lab Coat, which increases research speed and entity study rate, almost covering as much as a Duster, so maybe, just maybe, people will use this rather than the standard clothing setup. It's only missing the leg coverage.
Nice try, you dumb bitch.
You have 2 types of ritual apparel, a ritual mask and a ceremonial hood. The mask behaves like a war mask, increasing pain shock threshold. The ceremonial hood has no stat benefit, but covers the entire head. If it's made of a high quality material, like Devil Strand or Hyperweave, it offers greater protection than a simple steel helmet. A good choice whilst working towards something like marine gear. A turret pack is included with Anomaly, which lets you throw out a short life remote controlled turret that fights alongside you. Useful to have for covering your escape from places like pit gates, or to distract swarming enemies as you try and get some distance. If you're playing with Ideology, you'll find that you have 2 new memes, Ritualist at medium impact and Inhuman at high impact. Ritualist will slow your standard research, whilst buffing your ritual outcomes and creating a need to perform rituals on a semi-regular basis. It also enhances the study into the void itself. Inhuman lives up to its name. impacting execution, cannibalism, corpses, nutrient paste, skull spikes, slavery, physical love, clothing, organ use, and diversity of thought. The biggest impact with this meme is the required status of inhumanizing. So what does that mean exactly? Your mental breaks are changed. Once a pawn suffers a single mental break, they will gain the whole body effect of inhumanization in the health tab. This halves pain, impacts social interactions, allows them to withstand colder temperatures, lowers their animal, social, and artistic skills by 12, as well as disabling their need for beauty and outdoors. High impact indeed. This also removes the mood debuff of human shame, which is -8 if you're using this meme, and replaces it with void pleasure, that is a constant +8. All in all, I think that's about it. There are a few more mood buffs, debuffs, and health effects that I think I could talk about, but some of those might run a little bit into spoiler territory, so if you want to see them, try and complete the Monolith questline. Of all the Rimworld endgame quests, it's probably the best, which I know isn't really saying a lot, but it actually feels worthwhile. So where does Anomaly fit? It's something that I'm trying to be objective about, but it's hard to say. Anomaly gave me a lot of Rimworld moments, a lot more than I've had from any other piece of DLC. A pit gate spawning enemies as a flesh heart spreads across the map, traders wander in and start to fight the flesh beasts only for a death portal to begin, raising all of the corpses as shamblers. It's been utter chaos and I've loved it. I've been laughing like an idiot. What the fuck? Sure. Oh! Fucking sure. Yeah, sure, why not? Yep, any more? Oh, fuck this. Oh, yeah. Please, sir, could I have some more? Fuck me. What's this nonsense? But is this something I'd recommend as a first, or even a second DLC? No. This is Rimworld dialed up to 11 in terms of nonsense and difficulty. I think players would get much more out of biotech and royalty for every colony they play than they would Anomaly. As for where it stands with ideology, that's a hard thing to say. Ideology does play into every colony, realistically, but it also needs a lot of mods to elevate it to be as enjoyable as I found unmodded Anomaly. With that said, will I interact with the monolith in every single colony I play? Do I want to run containment and have all of these events happening in every single run? No. So realistically, I do get more out of royalty, biotech, and ideology, as the content that they include isn't so isolated. Anomaly is fantastic for what it is, but it behaves so differently to previous Rimworld DLC. It reminds me of a time when games had expansion packs that were almost entirely standalone in what they delivered. So this is Rimworld The Frozen Throne, whereas royalty, ideology, and biotech added content into Rimworld Reign of Chaos, if that makes sense. I always go to food metaphors for stuff like this. If Rimworld is the bread, biotech is the bacon, royalty is the tomato, and ideology is the lettuce, the bacon's the best bit. The tomato adds some good flavour, and I mean, the lettuce is there. Anomaly isn't in that sandwich. It's the cookie that you got to go with the meal deal. It's going to be awesome, but it's entirely separate from the sandwich. If anything, it's going to pull your attention away from the sandwich, so sometimes you just won't want to have that cookie, and that's fine, because the experience and enjoyment that you're getting from having it every now and again far outweighs its cost. As a final wrap up, I'd still say that biotech and royalty are top for me, but I honestly don't know where this fits against ideology. I'm tempted to say that I'd put it above ideology. You can enjoy all of the DLC without ideologians, and there isn't a lot else added from ideology that you'd really miss. Not having xenotypes would make the game really flat, especially with the flexibility of what you can do in Anomaly. Equally, with so much of the content working around psychic sensitivity, the psycasting from royalty just makes sense to have. Plus, you're going to want the gear that comes from royalty to better fight off the creatures, like cataphract armor or all of the installable enhancements. Anomaly's fantastic. I'm just not sure that it stands alone like some of the other DLC can. If you've been enjoying content like this, drop a like, and don't forget to subscribe or comment, do all the algorithm stuff. If you'd like to support me further, a link to Patreon is included in the description. You can name your own price in the supporter tier and it starts from just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits for videos like this. So thanks for watching, folks. If you have any other mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.